the tour.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Outstanding.
Look like 7, is that it? Or is there one more?
I didn't never hear give a number.
This is Charlie, right?
Bill.
You're not Charlie?
Bill.
Bill?
Yep.
How are you?
Very good. Let's see you again.
Okay. Is everybody here?
I believe so. As
Think
far
so.
as I know.
This it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we always start the tour right here because the number one question that's always asked me by my fans is, this is a big place with a lot of cars. Do you have a favorite? Yes, this is it. This is my favorite car, but it's not my favorite ride. My favorite ride is in the other room. It's the Swamp Rat 34, 323 miles an hour in 4 seconds from a dead stop. That'll give you a thrill. But this is a car that made me famous because number one, it right here on this is on the return road after beating this car at the World Series in 1957 in Cordova, when my club in 1955, when I won the Southeastern Championships with that car, and they gave me a little tea set for my wife and I, and the big, tall, blue-eyed, blonde-headed president looked down at me and said, "I guess you'll retire now." I said, "Why would I do that?" And he said, "Because you will never beat the Californians." I was the only one in the club that won anything at the race, and I won the whole race, and it was just, they couldn't hardly take it. And just 2 years later, I put this car, it didn't look like this, it looked just like that. This car went through all kinds of modifications from 1956 to 1962 when it went out of service. It was the longest car in service that in my career. But because back then drag racing didn't change very much and we didn't have any money. This car is built on a 1931 Chevy frame rails. I hacked it out of a 31 Chevy on West Hillsborough Avenue. Paid $35 for it, went out there on a Sunday morning at 3 o'clock that afternoon. I went out with the 2 rails. And all I had was an axe, a cold chisel, a big hammer, and a few hand tools. I'll never forget the old man at the counter. I come there Sunday morning, I had called about it, made an appointment, and I said, "I've come to get the frame." And of course the rule was I had to take it out for $35. It's $135 if they took it out. And he looked at me, and I had these little small box of tools and an axe, because the body on those 31 Chevys was wood with the metal tacked over them. Not too many years ago, I bought one in Kansas, and I brought it back here, and I physically restored it myself. It's in the other building. Thousands and thousands of little tiny nails to nail the metal on the wood. I'll never do that again. Anyway, he says, this old man behind the counter, he's probably about 39, 40. He says, "Sonny, do you think you can get that frame out of that car with those hand tools?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Give me the $35 and I'll take you out there and show you where it is." So I give him the $35. And at 3 o'clock that afternoon, not only did I get the frame, but the frame was completely disconnected from all the cross members, and all I had was the 2 rails. Great big gash on this wrist where one of the rivets slipped and nearly it missed the blood vessel, but it really laid it open. I had a red neckerchief, we always had them in those days, and I was wrapped, and I was going to use it to put on the rails. They would stick it out the back of the car. I was just wrapped it around, tied it up, and I just never stopped. I was completely crazy. I always have been. When I get on a project, I can't hear nothing, I can't see nothing. My wife could say something to me, I wouldn't even hear her. When I'm on a project doing something, that's all I know. I am super focused. And the museum proves that. This was formed in 1976, and when we moved here in '82, we had it in, I'll talk about that in a minute. When we moved here in '82, The machines were out there, but every artifact that the museum owned was in this room. And there's a 20,000 square foot building next door. There's a 10,000 addition there. There's a 4,000 feet addition back there. There's a 7,500 foot addition over there. And then a couple of other buildings, a Quonset hut. This place has grown, but that's another story, and we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, I come back from Cordova, out running the world champion, and I saw all these cars, and I watched them go down the strip 165 miles an hour, and all I could go was 155, and I knew what that difference was. But then I thought to myself, what is beyond him? What is it that he's doing that could be improved upon? And so I modified the car to look like this. And the big modifications was, you can see it got lower to the ground in the front. We lowered the front end. But the big modifications was the fuel delivery system. I made everything up my own. That car, everything, the fuel delivery system, you bought it at the speed shop. The little fuel block, all the lines, the little shut-off valves and all that stuff. And it just couldn't handle 98% natural methane. It needed more volume. And so I decided to do my own thing. I bought a great big gas cock valve with an opening in it like that, and great big fuel lines. And I made my own big fuel block, a great big square piece of tube, and it's all down there with the 8 lines, and I added it 2 carburetors. You can see when I come back from Cordova, there's the brand new carburetor right there. You could buy Stromberg's at the store for $15 then, brand new. They're $500 now, repumps. I took this thing to Brooksville with this modification, and we made a little warm up just to get it, because the engine was fresh. So I just made a little warm up and a little squirt off the line, and we come back and looked at everything, and then we put the 98% in it. And I took the ride of my life. And the announcer said, he's went off the charts. The charts only went to 165 miles an hour. He said, we don't know how fast he went. We know what the clock says, the ET through the traps, but we don't have the conversion. We don't know how to convert that. They didn't have any mathematicians up there. Should have been able to do it, you know. If you go through 132 feet in so many seconds, you should be able to figure that out. I could have done it if they'd have told me, but I didn't know. Anyway, Monday morning, they called California, the clock manufacturer, and they said, this is the ET through the clocks. What was the speed? And the guy says, oh my God, 176.4. That's a new world record. Who was it? And they said, Don Garlits. Oh my God, he's the guy that just outran Cook and Bedwell. I'm gonna call Escuderian. They called Escuderian because they knew I had an Esky cam. And Esky called me on the phone at the shop. My wife said, Ed Escuderian's on the phone. Do you want to talk to him? Normally I didn't talk to anybody on the phone in the shop. My wife took all the calls because my brother and I, if we weren't working, we weren't making money. And so I did take that call, and he says, hi pal, how are you? I said, I'm fine. He said, you're the new world record holder. I said, I am. He said, you went 176.4. Do you need any parts? I said, I do. I need some tires and new spark plugs. You got it. Where do you want me to ship it? And that was my beginning of my relationship with Escuderian. And of course, the Californians just hated it, and a lot of them said it didn't happen, but it didn't make any difference. I had a tour for 1958. This is in November. The phone rang off the hook. I did 50 appearances in 1958, mostly just exhibition runs. The track they didn't have anybody to race me, but they wanted to have 170 mile an hour time at their track, you know, so I would just make exhibition runs. Make 3 runs, and I got $400, and that was a lot of money then. And But then they started to put some races together. We had a big race in Texas, and I won that race. And then they sent the Californians, the 3 best Californians, they sent them back to Houston, and I outran all of them, and they went back to California with their tails between their legs. And then they said, we got to get him out to the West Coast on honest clocks. So they brought me to Bakersfield, and we went 174 miles an hour at Bakersfield at 1,500 feet above sea level, a record which stood for about 4 years. But we didn't win the race because a connected rod broke. This engine was using stock 57 Chrysler pistons and rods, if you can believe such a thing. We hadn't got into and when that rod broke, that gave Eskandarian an idea, and he started making aluminum rods, and that was the beginning of the aluminum rods, which they all use to this day. And but we fixed all of that. And then we were hired for 3 events, and we won the next 2 and set top time and low ET at Kingdon, California, and Chandler, Arizona. And we come home. Of course, we put a blower on it. Eskandarian made the blowers. We went to blowers. And we used the car till 1962. The best run I ever made was at Bainbridge, Georgia, 204.54. I wouldn't dare do that again. In fact, if I did that, the NHRA would permanently bar me from any NHRA races, which wouldn't make any difference at this point, and I don't race anyway. But you can see the tremendous difference from 55, and this was built in 56. It was really a move forward, and this is how it looked to start with. And what we've done is every time we find a really nice 1931 Chevy frame, we reproduce one of the looks. We have that one, and we have that one, and there's 2 more that we have. And you'll see them on the tour. They're over in the other building. So with that, that's kind of the Swamp Rat 1 history, and we'll go into the shop.